Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Corn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hey Herman and Corn. So we talked in recent days about a new promising AI model for agentic code generation called ZLM 4.7 that was just released by Z.ai, and it's an open source model, which means of course that it can be run locally. I was looking on one of the online forums to see what people were using to actually get it running on their local environment, and apparently a Mac can run at least a quantized version. I'm not a Mac guy, but it would be interesting. The main reason I'd actually be interested in running a model like this locally, a agentic AI tool, is that it might be faster. You have single use over the instance in the model. It's just there for you. So I'd be definitely willing to sacrifice some performance, but then if it's not going to be viable or the context window can't hold, there's just really no point. For local agentic AI tools where you have tool use and, working on a code base, you need to have a fairly generous context window. And any of the attempts I've made so far using these on my local machine, 12 gigabytes VRAM, it just hasn't been able to. Firstly, that's too small to run a quant, and it just hasn't really been performant. Like if it was able to kind of start working on a code base, after a few questions, a few turns, it's already out of context. So my question is this: if you did really want to run a code generation model specifically in your local environment, and you wanted a baseline of decent performance in the sense that it's going to be usable. It may not be exactly as good as you'll get from, it definitely won't be as good as you're going to get from a cloud model running the full model on unquantized, on whatever they're running, professional data center level inference. But you want to have something that, can actually be useful for getting work done. What do you think would be required for a model like this in terms of local hardware? I think the idea of running on a Mac is interesting, but I think it's more of a repurposing hardware hack. I'm thinking more about like you actually went to buy a local inference server specifically for this purpose. What would you be looking at in terms of hardware, approximate cost, etc.?
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn, and as always, I am here with my brother,
Herman Poppleberry, at your service. It is great to be here. We have got a really technical, hardware-focused prompt today that I have been itching to dive into.
Yeah, you have been vibrating with excitement since we listened to the audio. This one comes from our housemate Daniel, who lives here with us in Jerusalem. He is looking into running a specific AI model locally, and it sounds like his current computer is just not cutting it.
It is a classic problem, Corn. The software is moving at light speed, and the hardware we bought 2 years ago is already feeling like a vintage typewriter. Daniel is asking about the GLM 4.7 model from Z.ai. Specifically, he wants to use it for agentic code generation.
Okay, slow down already. You lost me at agentic. I know what a sloth is, and I know what code is, but what is an agentic code generator?
That is a great place to start. Most people think of AI like a chatbot, right? You ask a question, it gives an answer. But an agentic system is more like a digital intern. Instead of just writing a single function, an agentic model can look at your whole project, find a bug, think about how to fix it, try a solution, run the test to see if it worked, and then try again if it failed. It acts as an agent on your behalf.
Oh, So it is actually doing the work, not just suggesting the words. That sounds like it would need to keep a lot of information in its head at once.
Exactly. And that is where Daniel is hitting a wall. He mentioned he has 12 gigabytes of video RAM, or VRAM, and that it is not enough to maintain a usable context window. For those listening who might not know, the context window is basically the short-term memory of the AI. If you are writing code, the AI needs to remember the file you wrote 10 minutes ago to make sure the new code actually fits.
And 12 gigabytes is not enough? That sounds like a lot for a normal computer.
For gaming or video editing, 12 gigabytes is decent. But for these massive new models like GLM 4.7, it is like trying to fit a gallon of water into a thimble. Especially in late 2025, these models are getting more sophisticated and their memory requirements are ballooning.
So Daniel wants to build an inference server. He wants a dedicated machine just for running this AI. Where do we even start with that? Is he looking at spending a few $100, or are we talking about a second mortgage?
Well, it is definitely more than a few $100, but we can definitely find a sweet spot. To run GLM 4.7 with a decent context window, we need to talk about the two main paths, the PC route with dedicated graphics cards, or the Mac route with unified memory.
I remember Daniel mentioning in the audio that he is not really a Mac guy, but he heard they were good for this. Why is that?
It is all about how the memory is shared. In a PC, your system has regular RAM and your graphics card has VRAM. They are separate. If the AI model is 20 gigabytes and your graphics card only has 12, the whole thing slows down to a crawl because it has to keep moving data back and forth. But a Mac with Apple Silicon has unified memory. The processor and the graphics cores all pull from the same pool. So if you buy a Mac with 128 gigabytes of RAM, the AI can use almost all of it.
That sounds like a massive advantage. But if he wants to stick to a PC build, what is the baseline for decent performance?
For a PC build in December 2025, the gold standard for local AI is still the NVIDIA RTX series. If 12 gigabytes is not enough, the next logical step up is 24 gigabytes. You can find that on the older RTX 3090 or the 4090. But here is the kicker, Corn. For agentic code generation, even 24 gigabytes might be tight if you want a really long context window.
Wait, so if he buys a top-of-the-line graphics card, he might still be limited?
Possibly. See, the model itself takes up space, and the context window, the memory of what you have been doing, also takes up space. As the conversation gets longer, the memory usage grows. This is what we call the KV cache. To have a baseline of usable performance, Daniel is probably looking at a multi-GPU setup.
2 graphics cards in one box? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Is that even allowed?
Oh, it is more than allowed. It is encouraged in the AI community. You can take 2 used RTX 3090 cards, which each have 24 gigabytes, and link them up. Suddenly, you have 48 gigabytes of VRAM. That is enough to run GLM 4.7 at a high precision with a very healthy context window.
Okay, let's talk numbers. If Daniel goes out today and tries to build this 2-card monster, what is the damage to his wallet?
If he goes the used route, which is very common for these builds, he can probably find 3090 cards for about $700 to $800 each. So that is $1,600 for the GPUs. Then you need a beefy power supply because those cards are thirsty, a motherboard that can actually fit 2 giant cards, and a case with enough fans to keep it from melting. You are probably looking at a total of around $2,500 to $3,000 for a solid, home-built inference server.
$3,000 just to run a coding assistant? Man, I think I will just stick to eating leaves and hanging from trees. That is a lot of money.
It is, but think about the value. If you are a developer, and this agentic tool saves you 10 hours of work a week, it pays for itself in a couple of months. Plus, you have total privacy. None of your code is being sent to a cloud server owned by a giant corporation. For some people, that privacy is worth every penny.
That is a fair point. I guess I forget how much people value their secrets. But before we get deeper into the Mac versus PC debate and the specific specs, let's take a quick break for our sponsors.
Are you tired of your computer being slower than a turtle in a tar pit? Is your VRAM so low it can barely remember its own name? You need the RAM Slammer 5000. The RAM. Slammer is the world's first external memory expansion that plugs directly into your wall outlet. Using patented lightning capture technology, it converts raw electricity into digital thoughts, giving your computer an infinite context window. Does it work? My cousin says it does. Is it safe? Define safe. The RAM Slammer. 5000 comes in 3 colors: carbonized, scorched, and void. Warning: do not use near water, pets, or people you care about. May cause localized gravitational anomalies. RAM Slammer 5000. Buy now.
All right, thanks, Larry. I think I will pass on the localized gravitational anomalies today. Herman, back to reality, please.
Yeah, let's definitely stay away from plugging our memory into the wall outlet. So, we were talking about the cost of a PC build. About $3,000 for a dual 3090 setup. But we should also mention the 4090. A single 4090 is incredibly fast, but it still only has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. In late 2025, we are starting to see the 50 series cards, and everyone is hoping for more VRAM, but Nvidia likes to be stingy with it.
So if Daniel really wants to go pro, and he wants to avoid the headaches of building a PC and dealing with driver issues, is the Mac actually a better deal?
It might be. If he looks at a Mac Studio with an M4 Ultra chip, he could configure that with 192 gigabytes of unified memory. That machine would be an absolute beast for local AI. It could run models much larger than GLM 4.7, and it could handle context windows that would make a PC cry.
But Daniel said he is not a Mac guy. Is the software support there?
It has gotten much better. Tools like Llama, LM Studio, and especially MLX, which is Apple's own machine learning framework, have made running models on Mac incredibly easy. It is often a one-click setup. On a PC, you are often dealing with Linux, CUDA drivers, and complex Python environments. It is a lot of fun if you are a nerd like me, but it is a lot of work.
Okay, so let's weigh the options for him. Option A is the DIY PC with 2 used graphics cards for $3,000. Option B is the Mac Studio, which probably costs, what, $5,000 or $6,000?
Yeah, a high-spec Mac Studio is going to be in that $5,000 to $7,000 range. It is a significant jump in price, but you get a lot of memory and a very small, quiet machine. Those dual GPU PCs are loud and they put out a lot of heat. It is basically a space heater that also happens to write code.
Well, we do live in Jerusalem and it gets cold in the winter. Maybe the space heater is a feature, not a bug.
Ha! True, but there is a middle ground. Daniel could look at a single GPU build with an RTX 4090 and use something called quantization.
Quantization. That sounds like another one of your fancy words. Break it down for the sloth in the room.
Think of it like a high-quality photo versus a JPEG. A high-quality photo has all the detail, but the file is huge. A JPEG throws away some of the information that your eyes don't really notice to make the file smaller. Quantization does that to an AI model. You can take a large model and squeeze it down from 16 bits to 4 bits. It loses a tiny bit of intelligence, but it takes up a quarter of the space.
So he could run a bigger model on his 12 gigabyte card if he just squeezed it enough?
To an extent, yes. But Daniel's problem is the context window. Even with quantization, the memory needed for the conversation itself, the KB cache, does not shrink nearly as much. For agentic code generation, you really need that raw VRAM. If he wants a baseline of decent usable performance, I would say 24 gigabytes is the absolute minimum, and 48 gigabytes is where it actually starts to feel good.
So, if he is building this today, December 27th, 2025, what are the specific parts he should put on his shopping list to get that 48 gigabytes?
Okay, here is the recipe for a solid mid-range inference server. First, a motherboard with at least 2 PCIe slots that are spaced far apart. These cards are thick. Look for something like an Asus Pro WS series. Second, 2 used RTX 3090 cards. You want the 3090 because it has 24 gigabytes and it is much cheaper than the 4090. Third, a 1600 watt power supply. You do not want to skimp here. If those cards both spike at once, a cheap power supply will literally pop.
Pop? Like a balloon?
More like a small explosion with a sight of blue smoke. Avoid that. Fourth, at least 64 gigabytes of system RAM. Even though the AI lives on the GPU, the system still needs room to breathe. And finally, a case with excellent airflow. I am talking 6 or 7 fans.
And the cost for all that together?
If he is savvy with used parts, he can get that done for about $2,800. If he buys everything brand new, and maybe goes for the newer cards, he is looking at $4,000 plus.
That is a lot of money, but I guess it is an investment in his craft. You mentioned something earlier about the context window math. How do you actually calculate how much memory you need for a certain number of words?
It is a bit technical, but the rule of thumb is that for every 1,000 tokens, which is about 750 words, you need a certain amount of VRAM for the cache. At 16-bit precision, it is about 1 gigabyte of VRAM for every 8,000 tokens. So if Daniel wants a 32,000 token context window, which is about the size of a small book, he needs 4 gigabytes just for the memory of the conversation, on top of the size of the model itself.
So if the model is 20 gigabytes and the context is 4 gigabytes, he is already at 24. He is maxed out on a single card.
Exactly. And 32,000 tokens is actually not that much for a coding agent. If you have 10 different code files open, you can hit that limit in 5 minutes. That is why the 48 gigabyte setup is so much better. It gives him room to breathe. He could go up to a 64,000 or even a 128,000 token context window. That is where the real magic happens. That is when the AI can actually understand the whole project.
I am starting to see why he is frustrated with his 12 gigabyte card. It is like trying to write a novel on a sticky note.
That is a perfect analogy, Corn. It is exactly like that. He has this incredibly smart brain in GLM 4.7, but it has the short-term memory of a goldfish because of his hardware.
So we have talked about the PC build and the Mac Studio. Is there any other weird hardware out there? What about those enterprise cards you see on eBay?
Oh, the NVIDIA A-series or the old Tesla cards? They are interesting. You can sometimes find an NVIDIA A60000 with 48 gigabytes of VRAM on a single card. They're designed for data centers, so they don't have fans. You have to rig up your own cooling system. It is a bit of a hack, but for a dedicated inference server, it can be a great way to get a lot of memory without the complexity of dual GPUs. They are still expensive, though. Usually around $3,000 to $4,000 just for the card.
Man, there is no cheap way out of this, is there?
Not if you want decent usable performance, as Daniel put it. You can run these models on your CPU using your regular system RAM, but it is painfully slow. It is like watching someone type with one finger. For coding, you want that instant feedback. You want the AI to suggest the next line before you even finish thinking of it. For that, you need the speed of a GPU.
Okay, so let's summarize the advice for Daniel. If he wants the most bang for his buck, go for the dual-RTX 3090 PC build. It will cost him around $3,000 and give him 48 gigabytes of VRAM, which is plenty for GLM 4.7.
Right, and if he wants the easiest, most reliable experience and he is willing to pay a premium, go for a Mac Studio with an M4 Ultra and at least 128 gigabytes of RAM. That is the buy it once and forget about it option.
And if he is really on a budget?
If he absolutely cannot spend more than $1,000, his best bet is to find a single used RTX 3090 for $700, put it in his current machine if the power supply can handle it, and use heavy quantization. He will be limited to a smaller context window, but it will be a massive upgrade from his current 12 gigabyte setup.
That sounds like a solid plan. I hope that helps Daniel out. It is cool that he is doing this right here in the house. Maybe once he gets it running, he can program a robot to bring me more snacks so I don't have to climb down from my branch.
Knowing Daniel, he would probably program the robot to make you do your own chores. Corn.
Hey, a sloth can dream. This has been a really interesting deep dive, Herman. I actually feel like I understand why VRAM matters now. It is not just about how fast the computer is. It is about how much it can hold in its head at once.
Exactly. In the world of AI, memory is just as important as speed. Maybe even more so for these agentic tasks where context is everything.
Well, I think we have covered the bases. Daniel, we hope your new Inference server build goes smoothly. Let us know which route you choose.
And if you need help installing those 24 fans to keep the 3090s cool, you know where to find me. I will be the one wearing the thermal goggles.
Thanks for listening to My Weird Prompts. If you have a prompt you want us to tackle, head over to myweirdprompts.com and send it our way through the contact form. We love hearing from you.
And you can find all our previous episodes on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. We've got a full RSS feed on the website too for you subscribers.
This has been My Weird Prompts. I am Corn.
And I am Herman Poppleberry.
See you next time.
Goodbye, everyone. Give you GPUs a hug from me.
Wait, before you go, do you have too much money and not enough mystery in your life? Buy my mystery box. It is a box. It is a mystery. It might contain a vintage GPU, or it might contain a very angry hornet. Only one way to find out. Mystery box. Buy now.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.